As I suspected, the steps that I've made for the rear, stairway to heaven at the rear, were not going to be sufficient for this front roof because the pitch is quite a bit more severe. So I'd put some in place. You can see I'd already put some of the old steps that I've made at the rear onto the front. But when you're trying to step on there, because you've only got about 75 millimeters or 3 inches to step onto, it's just not enough because you don't even get any further traction with the batten because it's, as I said, the pitch is quite severe. So I've had to rethink that and come up with another solution. And the solution I came up with was to use one of the OSB boards that I've got, which is around about 2.6 meters in length and about 60 centimeters wide, is to create some new steps slightly broader that will be able to
Bonjour,
obviously help
ça va?
me gain access up
Ouais.
and down this roof, a bit like I did on the rear. Now, this part of the video is an epic fail because I thought the camera angle was all right for showing me making the steps, but got it completely wrong. So all you're seeing is the bald head of an old man, mostly, while he's trying to construct. So I've cut down the boards to around about 150 millimeters width. There you go, there's one in place. Using the Aris rail as a support between the two bits of panel. Again, because there's only me filming, so the camera doesn't move. So unfortunately, now all you're looking at branches and a telescopic ladder. But this bit is fairly quick, so there you can see I've tried one of the panels, I've tried one of the steps rather, and it's not quite, it's slightly too long after a thread, which means that it's not sitting square on the batten. So I've taken it down and then cut it down to 125 millimeters, which is about 5 inches. So it's got a tread of about 5 inches and an extend or a riser of about 6 inches or 150 millimeters. And I just screw the two sides onto a piece of Aris rail, which will give it support on the main part of the tread. And then I'll use some of the old trellis that was there before to just put as a lip on the front of the new step, and then I'll just put one screw in through the top of the tread onto or into the batten, and with that it should hold fairly securely. The joists or the rafters on this section of the wall are a little bit narrower, which is handy. So I've been able to utilise the OSB board with very little wastage. Was able to create, I think, 12 steps in total. So it will be a question of I put the steps in place. I can step up about 60 centimetres at a time to try and get me up to the top of the roof. And then when it comes to things like putting the ridge tiles in place, obviously it'd be much easier if you've got a platform of or a tread of 5 inches or 125 millimeters to step on, because I'll need a bucket of mortar as well when the top ridge tiles go on. So it's whatever you can do in all things in life. Whatever you're doing, you need to calculate what risks are involved, and you need to litigate those risks and make sure that you're always safe. You're always in an environment that's safe for working in. So sometimes I think some of the things I look to do look a little bit precarious, but in fact, during my 40 odd years in construction, I haven't actually had any accidents directly concerned with construction. I'm actually missing 2 discs in my spine, but one of those was actually windsurfing accident in Africa donkeys years ago, and the other was just sort of general wear and tear over the years. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, like I say, if you're doing anything, if you're working at height, you need to take all the precautions necessary. And if something takes a little bit longer to do, it takes a little bit longer to do. It's not the end of the world. It's better that it gets done and everything's done safely, rather than trying to rush it and take risks and the possibility of injury. So I prefer to spend a couple of half an hour making these new steps. I'd already done the rear steps, which worked quite well because the pitch on the rear roof was a lot less severe. So it was sufficient with the width of the Arris rail and the bit of batten. I had enough room to sort of work my way up the roof, as you've seen in previous videos. On this one, because of the pitch, I need something a little bit more broad to take my size 11 boots. So I'm sort of staggering them across at the moment. It will be a question of playing around with them in place to see what works best. But generally, I can sort of step up a couple of feet at a time, or 60 centimetres at a time. And then these can just be fairly easily removed and moved across as I work my way across the roof. So the OSB board cost, I think, per panel, it's around about €9 a panel, €10 a panel, and I've got 12 steps out of that. So a step for less than €1, and it's just so. I'll be honest with you, it's so much easier to work like that. You know, you've got a bit of room to manoeuvre. You've also got a bit of a platform for stacking the tiles on as and when it comes to it. And I'm just giving a bit of a test there just to see how we're getting on, and that everything's working fine. So I did feel that possibly that was going to be the case, that I would need something a bit more specific, a bit more broader to work with. Right, so here's a couple of short videos where I'm going to be working first of all on the inside of the roof, and you're viewing it from the outside. So you'll see a little bald-headed man's head popping up in a minute like that. And I'm going to start taking off the tiles from the inside, which is kind of the easiest. Again, it's the easiest way of doing it when you're working alone. There are some batten in place, but I haven't put the other steps into the. This is slightly earlier than the where you show. I've just shown you the steps going on, and while I can work at height in the inside by using step ladders or the trestles, I just find it's slightly easier to work from the inside, stack the tiles up, and as you can see on the right hand side, I've left an opening, and that will be my access in and out of the loft until it comes to close up the front roof, and then that will be the final part that's done. And somewhere around about that section there will be the other roof window fitted, which will give light to. I'm hoping that on that right hand side there's going to be 2 bedrooms, so there's enough light on the far side, which is the rear roof, because there's a large velux there, and there's also going to be a window on the side of the building where there's currently the opening for access to the loft, which is only from the outside at the moment before the staircase goes in. And so there'll be plenty of light on the rear, and I just needed to get some light on this front section. And then on the left hand side, there's probably only going to be 1 bedroom there, because it's a slightly narrower area between the partition of the neighbour's house and the partition in the centre of my house, and also because that's going to be where the staircase is coming up and into the first floor area. So that will be supplied with light again from the rear, the rear velux, the velux that's at height. There's 2 veluxes there on the rear. So getting rid of the old batten, just chucking it away. That'll be used for kindling for when my wood burner goes in place, and having a bit of a tidy up as I go. There's lots of defective tiles on this roof, as there was on the rear. There seems to be a lot more of the sort of ready coloured tiles, the slightly less cooked tiles, as I like to say, on this front section, and the weather's got to them and they've just deteriorated. So it's going to be a question of again cannibalizing the tiles from the barn. And to finish off this roof, again, it's probably going to be about 10% of these tiles that need replacing, so around about 300 or so tiles I'm going to need. But thankfully, I've got the tiles in the barn that I can use. And then somebody made a very useful comment saying, if I intend to do the barn in part in tile and part in metal sheeting, there'll be a disparity between the weight distribution between the two, so I'll have to look into that. So thanks ever so much for that comment. I'll have to look into that and make sure that obviously that isn't the case. And if I am able to tile the side that you can see the elevation that's facing the house, and then do the far side in the metal sheeting or the tole, as the French call it, that will be very useful. And obviously repairing the apex, which is currently in a very poor state on that part of the barn. And also there's another part of the barn which was in slate, and most of that roof has actually collapsed entirely now. So it would be nice to get a roof back onto there as well, because the barn is enormous. The barn, I believe, is I haven't measured it out, but I believe that the square meterage is probably greater than that of the house. So the downstairs I'll be able to use certainly as a garage. You probably get a couple of cars in there, and a workshop as well, and whatever. And the upstairs, we'll wait and see whether we could make it kind of like a mini hostel. I don't know. A few ideas. I'm thinking of possibly trying to do some workshop classes once the house is finished. If anybody was interested in coming over to stay, to learn how to do various things like tiling, like electrical work, plumbing, carpentry, plastering, things like that. I don't know whether that would appeal to people or not, but it's something I thought maybe I could offer. So you could have the sort of best of both worlds. So you could see a lovely part of France. You're not too far away from Paris. If anybody wanted to do a day trip over to there, you've got Le Mans as well, which is a lovely town, and Chartres, which is again a very nice town either side of this property. But also you could learn some techniques from an old master such as myself. You can be my apprentices. So if that appeals to anybody, obviously you can get in touch, and we'll see how we get on with that. So this is now. So I've now changed the angle, I've changed the camera, put it inside the loft, so you can see the technique I'm using to strip off the front roof, and you can also see roughly the state of the rafters and stuff. So it's a question of taking about 12 tiles, 14 tiles at a time, and then just stacking them down, ready for reuse. The ones that are any good, they'll obviously just be used for something else. Use a bit of hardcore or whatever I can utilise those for, just filling in. Some of the pathways downstairs I'm going to be putting in the garden. As you can see here, the rafters are slightly closer together on this section, and they're slightly more bulky. Now, I did chat with a neighbour recently, the neighbour that's lived there many years, one of the many neighbours, and he said his grandmother actually lived in this house back in the day. And back in the day, the house was smaller, so as I suspected, the rear of the property has been added on at some stage. And I asked him, and he couldn't remember exactly, but he believes it was towards the end of the 1960s that they rejigged the roof at the rear to accommodate what became a kitchen and a downstairs bathroom. Because when you look at the A-frame within the property, you can see clearly on the rear that it's been added on. The A-frame existing is as it was back in the 1800s when it was done, and then they've added huge oak beams to extend, and that's why the pitch on the rear roof is a lot less severe than the pitch on the front roof. So back in the day, they would have been exactly the same pitch. So it's quite interesting to see that, you know, the evolution of a house over a century or so. You know, at the time the barn was a stables, because obviously this is all agricultural land, so it would have been long before you had tractors and stuff. You would have had horses that would have been used to help plough the fields. So it's very interesting to look around the house and just see the social history that's involved in what went on back in the day in and around this part of the world, which is still agricultural to this day. There's there's a field within a within a 2 minute walk from here where we've got there's a massive cows that graze in the field there. It's quite nice to see. I've seen a few horses as well, um, and so there's still life in these rural areas. I know there's certain parts of France which don't seem to be overly occupied at all, particularly areas like the Creuse, um, which the French have a particular term for, which I won't repeat here, but it's not particularly polite what they say about the Creuse, people that live in the Creuse. Um, so so I'm continuing stacking tiles. I keep digressing because things pop into my head as I'm watching the video, like yourselves. Um, taking taking this roof apart and redoing it is a real sort of labour of love. It was the one thing that was absolutely critical. It had had so many years of neglect and non-maintenance, and it was just a question of it needed to be done, and it needed to be the first, really more after the house was cleared out. It needed to be the first thing that was done. So I'm very pleased that the rear roof is finished now, albeit the gutter needs to be put in place. But this front roof, once that's done, because there was a large hole in the front roof towards the centre of the building that had been open for many years, and that's just not a good thing, is it? Who wants a big hole in their roof? Not me. Right. So continuing on with this, obviously, like I said earlier on, you need to always make sure that you're working safe. So there's people that fall off step ladders and break legs and stuff. So you need to make sure it's always nice and sturdy, um, and you've got a safe working platform to get on with whatever task you're getting on with. Um, and this is what I always tend to do. You can see just to the right of me also there, the trestles are in place. I can move them across as the roof gets higher, where the step ladders I won't be able to utilise the step ladders to access the tiles. I can use the trestles that are in place, and that's another great thing about when you make stuff yourself. If I'd hired a couple of boards, then a couple of scaffold boards, or a couple of towers rather, you'd have to be constantly undoing them and moving them. And with this, I've still got the trestles that are out on the rear roof. I've got the trestles that are within the loft area, the area it's going to be the bedrooms, and I've also got my new Heath Robinson trestles that are outside on the front, which gives me access to either side of the house, other than the porch area, which I've just left in place. And I'm using that as an area just for holding some tiles and stuff. The roof caused me a bit of concern, like I say, the pitch of it, because it felt a little bit awkward to be trying to work on it. I thought it would have been easier, to be honest with you, but there you go. You see, often what you assume to be is sometimes not the case. And on that, I assume because the pitch was higher, it would actually be easy to work on it because you're almost upright as you're working on it. But actually, because you've got no footing, because the batten here is very thin, it's sort of 2/3 of an inch or about 15 millimeters in thickness. You've got nothing at all to take the width of your boot as you're trying to stand on it. And that's why I decided to utilize the OSB board and create the new steps. So I think we're getting towards the end of this part of the video, and there's a couple of just shorter bits of video just to show you a couple of aspects at the front where I have put re-put the steps in place, so you can see the logic behind it. Just finishing off stacking here. I've tried to try to use the membrane as I did on the front, where I used an entire section from left to right or from right to left, without any cuts in it, without any joins in it, other than the overlapping joins from top to bottom. I just find with all these things that the less joins you've got in it, the less likelihood you've got of any leaks and stuff getting in. There's a couple of slight tears in where some of the tiles further up from where I'm working just slipped as I was undoing the other ones, and got sliding down the roof and caused a couple of minor tears in part of the membrane. But that's fairly easy repair. I can patch in with offcuts of membrane and just silicone it to the inside. There's not much, but it's it's some of the things that happen when you're working with old roofs. You've got old things, you've got lots of tiles that I said are defective and just they weren't holding and they've just fallen through. And such is life of these things like that. And obviously it's only me working on it, so you haven't got the chance of somebody looking out for you while you're doing bits and pieces. So here we are, steps. There's several steps in place there. There's more than enough that I need in that particular section, but I was just trying to work out how my treads would work as I'm going up and down the roof. Slightly closer view of them. Very successfully done by myself. Gives me a safe platform to work at height on, because this front roof is higher overall than the rear roof as such. From the front, it's better to take the precautions and make sure you're safe. And then just to finish off, I've just opened up the couple of veluxes on the rear roof just to try and get a bit of ventilation coming through, which helps to dry out the house, which has had years and years of humidity. Anyway, as ever, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching and thanks for all your support, and I'll speak to you soon.